The organ swelled like a heartbeat too loud to ignore, filling the vaulted nave of St. Mary's Cathedral in downtown Chicago with notes that promised forever. Madeline Harper stood at the altar, her silk veil trembling in the draft from the stained-glass windows, every fiber of her being screaming to run as her groom. Daniel smiled down at her with the easy confidence of a man who thought he knew her soul. But then the doors creaked open one last time, and Evelyn Sinclair glided in, elegant, unyielding, her emerald eyes locking onto Madeline's like a key turning in a lock long rusted shut, and the world Madeline had built brick by fragile brick shattered in an instant, pulling her back to a summer 12 years ago when love wasn't a choice, but a wildfire that consumed them both. That fire had started innocently enough, or so Madeline told herself in the quiet hours before dawn, when sleep fled like a thief. It was 2013, and she was 24, fresh out of Northwestern with a journalism degree clutched like a shield against the uncertainties of a post-recession world. Chicago's summers were brutal then, the kind that turned Lake Michigan into a steamy haze and pressed the city's pulse against your skin. Madeline had landed a gig at a small indie magazine in Wicker Park, scribbling freelance pieces on everything from rooftop bars to the hidden murals of Pilsen. It paid in exposure and instant ramen, but it was hers, a foothold in the dream of telling stories that mattered. Evelyn Sinclair was the editor-in-chief, a force of nature at 40, with a reputation that preceded her like thunder, sharp-tongued, visionary, the woman who turned a floundering rag into Chicago's must-read voice on culture and politics. Madeline's first interview was a blur of nerves and admiration, Evelyn in a crisp white blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows, leaning over her desk in that corner office overlooking the L tracks. "Show me why I should care about your words, Miss Harper," she'd said, her voice like aged whiskey, smooth but with a burn that lingered. Madeline had stammered through her clips, her cheeks flushing under those piercing green eyes, and when Evelyn leaned closer, her perfume, a subtle mix of jasmine and leather, wrapping around them like a secret, something shifted. It wasn't just respect, it was a spark, dangerous and alive. By week's end, Madeline was hired as an assistant editor, her desk a battered metal thing squeezed between stacks of galleys and overflowing inboxes. The office buzzed with a chaos of deadlines, writers cursing at laptops, interns fetching coffee runs to intelligentsia, the constant hum of the city bleeding in through the windows. Evelyn ran it all with an iron fist wrapped in velvet, pushing Madeline harder than anyone, but always with a glance that said, "I see you." Late nights became routine, the two of them poring over layouts under the harsh fluorescence, Evelyn's laughter cutting through the exhaustion like a lifeline. "You're too good for this grind, kid," she'd say, tossing Madeline a takeout container of Thai from the spot on Damon Avenue. "But stick with me, and we'll burn this town down." Madeline didn't know when the lines blurred. Maybe it was the night of the magazine's 10th anniversary party, held in a converted warehouse in Logan Square, fairy lights strung like stars against exposed brick. The air was thick with craft beer and indie rock, bodies swaying to a cover band belting out Fleetwood Mac. Madeline had on a simple black dress, thrift store chic, her hair loose for once, feeling bold after 2 IPAs. Evelyn found her by the makeshift bar, a glass of red in hand, her tailored slacks and silk blouse making her look like she owned the night, which, in a way, she did. "Dance with me," Evelyn said, not a question, her hand extended like a dare. They moved to the edge of the crowd, Evelyn's palm warm against Madeline's waist, guiding her through the slow sway of Landslide. The lyrics hung between them, Mickey's voice crooning about taking risks, about mountains crumbling to the sea, and Madeline's heart hammered as Evelyn's breath ghosted her ear. "You make me remember what it's like to feel young again," Evelyn murmured, her fingers tracing a light circle on Madeline's back. It was electric, that touch, a current that raced straight to Madeline's core, awakening something she'd buried deep under layers of straight-laced expectations and family dinners in the suburbs where her parents still whispered about finding a nice boy. They didn't kiss that night, not with the parties swirling around them, not with Evelyn's husband, Richard, schmoozing donors across the room. But later, as the crowd thinned and Madeline waited for her bus on Milwaukee Avenue, Evelyn pulled up in her sleek Audi, the window rolling down like an invitation. "Get in. It's too late for public transit." The drive was silent at first, the city lights streaking past like shooting stars, until Evelyn's hand found Madeline's thigh, resting there light as a feather. "Tell me a secret," Evelyn said, her voice low. Madeline swallowed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I've never felt like this before. Like, I could rewrite my whole story." Evelyn pulled over near the lakefront, the waves lapping at the concrete barriers under a sliver of moon. She turned, cupping Madeline's face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks. "Then let's start writing it together." Their lips met then, soft at first, tentative, like testing the weight of a dream. But it deepened quickly, Evelyn's mouth hungry, experienced, tasting of wine and unspoken yearnings. Madeline melted into it, her hands fisting in Evelyn's blouse, the world narrowing to the heat between them, the distant honk of taxis a faint echo. It was her first kiss with a woman, her first taste of what desire could really mean, not the polite fumbling with college boys, but this fierce, consuming pull that made her feel seen, desired, whole. From there, it was a stolen summer, pieced together in the shadows of their lives. Weekday afternoons in Evelyn's office, door locked, Evelyn's desk cleared of papers as Madeline knelt between her legs, learning the maps of her body with reverent touches and gasps that echoed off the bookshelves. "God, Madeline, you're a natural," Evelyn would whisper, her fingers tangled in Madeline's hair, pulling her closer until they both shattered, breathless and spent. Weekends were riskier. Hikes in the Indiana dunes where they'd wander off-trail, Evelyn pinning Madeline against a dune, their laughter turning to moans muffled by the wind. Or quiet evenings in Evelyn's Lincoln Park brownstone, Richard away on business trips, where they'd cook pasta in the sunlit kitchen, Evelyn's arms around Madeline's waist from behind, nipping at her neck until dinner burned, and they tumbled to the rug instead. But love like theirs was never simple, not in a city that preached progress while whispering judgments. Evelyn was married, yes, Richard, the steady architect who'd given her stability, a son named Daniel who was away at boarding school in New England. "It's not what you think," Evelyn confessed one rainy night, curled against Madeline in the king-sized bed that smelled faintly of his cologne. "We married young, built a life. But he knows. Parts of it. We've had our arrangements." Madeline wanted to believe it, to ignore the guilt gnawing at her edges. The way her phone buzzed with texts from friends setting her up on dates, she dodged with excuses. She was falling, hard, irrevocably, into Evelyn's orbit, dreaming of a future where they could claim this publicly, walk hand in hand down Michigan Avenue without the weight of secrets. Yet cracks formed early. Evelyn's hesitations grew. A cancelled rendezvous because Richard was under the weather, a sharp intake of breath when Madeline suggested leaving her job to avoid the gossip. "This isn't a fairy tale, darling," Evelyn said one evening over wine on her balcony, the skyline glittering like a promise unkept. "I have a life, a family. Daniel adores you already. He calls you his cool Aunt Mad from those office visits. We can't append that." Madeline's chest tightened, the words a knife twist. She was 24, full of the reckless fire of youth. Evelyn, at 40, carried the scars of compromises made. "Then what are we?" Madeline demanded, tears hot on her cheeks. Evelyn pulled her close, kissing away the salt. "We're us. For now." "Isn't that enough?" It wasn't, not really. By autumn, the leaves turning crimson along the lake, the magazine folded under financial strain, Evelyn's vision too bold for shrinking ad dollars. Layoffs hit like a storm, Madeline among them, her desk cleared in a single afternoon. Evelyn fought for her, raging in board meetings, but it was futile. "Go chase your dreams elsewhere," Evelyn urged, slipping an envelope into Madeline's hand. References, contacts, a severance check that felt like hush money. "New York, maybe. Or LA. You're meant for bigger stories." Madeline saw the lie in her eyes, the fear of what staying would mean. Their last night was a blur of desperation. Evelyn's brownstone, candles flickering against the walls, bodies entwined in a tangle of sheets and sobs. "I love you," Madeline gasped, her nails digging into Evelyn's back as they moved together, slow and aching, drawing out every touch like it was the end, which it was. Evelyn's response was a broken whisper against her throat. "And I you, my fierce girl. Always." Dawn came too soon, Madeline slipping out before Richard's alarm, the door clicking shut like a final sentence. She left Chicago a week later, boarding a Greyhound to New York with a duffel bag and a heart in tatters. The city swallowed her, freelance gigs for Vice, late nights in Bushwick lofts, dates with women who were kind but fated against Evelyn's ghost. Years blurred. A book deal on urban legends, a TED Talk on storytelling in the digital age, therapy sessions where she unpacked the what-ifs. By 28, Madeline was back in Chicago, headhunted by a glossy lifestyle mag, her name whispered in industry circles. Stability beckoned, a nice apartment in Ukrainian village, friends who dragged her to pride parades she attended half-heartedly, the ache dulled to a familiar hum. And then, Daniel Sinclair re-entered her life. They'd kept loose touch over the years, holiday cards, a coffee when he interned at her old magazine during college. Now 26, he was the spitting image of his father. Tall, broad-shouldered, with Richard's easy charm and Evelyn's sharp wit. They met at a networking event in the Loop, clinking glasses over craft cocktails. "You look incredible, Mads," he said, his smile lighting up the room. "Like you haven't aged a day since you were terrorizing Mom's deadlines." Laughter flowed, stories shared, and before she knew it, dinner turned to dates. Walks along the river walk, brunches at Wild Berry Pancakes, his hand warm in hers as autumn chilled the air. Daniel was safe, steady, the kind of love Madeline thought she deserved after the chaos of her youth. He proposed on a snowy night in Millennium Park, under the bean reflecting 1,000 fractured lights, the ring a simple gold band that whispered normalcy. "I want to build a life with you," he said, and she said yes, because saying no would mean unraveling everything. The wedding planning blurred into a whirlwind. Venues scouted in Oak Park, dresses fitted at a bridal boutique in the Gold Coast, Evelyn's voice on conference calls cool and efficient as the mother of the groom. Madeline hadn't seen her in person since the proposal dinner, a stiff affair at Gibson Steakhouse where Evelyn's handshake lingered a fraction too long, her eyes searching Madeline's with a depth that stole her breath. "Welcome to the family, dear," she'd said, the words laced with something unspoken. Madeline buried it deep, focusing on centerpieces and vows, telling herself it was ancient history, a chapter closed. But now, here in St. Mary's, with the priest intoning blessings and guests shifting in the pews, Daniel's side a sea of Sinclairs, her own a smattering of colleagues and her pragmatic parents from Naperville, Evelyn's presence hit like a rogue wave. She was seated in the front row, regal in a sapphire gown that hugged her still-toned figure, silver threads in her hair catching the light like secrets woven in. As the processional music faded and the officiant called for the exchange of rings, Evelyn rose to adjust Daniel's boutonniere, her fingers brushing his lapel with maternal pride. Then her gaze lifted, straight to Madeline, and time fractured. In that frozen heartbeat, Madeline saw it all. The curve of Evelyn's smile from dune-kissed mornings, the way her laugh crinkled the corners of her eyes during office marathons, the tremble in her voice that last night when promises cracked like thin ice. Daniel's hand squeezed hers, expectant, the ring hovering like a question mark. "Mads? You okay?" His voice was soft, concerned, pulling her back. The congregation murmured, a ripple of unease. Evelyn's expression didn't change, poised, unflappable, but her eyes held a storm, a plea, a mirror to Madeline's own turmoil. I can't," Madeline whispered, the words escaping like a confession long overdue. The ring slipped from her fingers, clattering to the marble floor with a chime that echoed louder than any vow. Gasps rippled through the pews, her mother's hand flying to her mouth, Daniel's face crumpling in confusion. But Madeline's eyes stayed locked on Evelyn's, the air between them charged, alive with the ghost of what they'd lost, and perhaps, impossibly, what they might reclaim. She turned, veil whipping behind her like a flag of surrender, and bolted down the aisle, the cathedral's cool stone blurring under her heels. Outside, the October wind whipped off the lake, sharp and clarifying, Chicago's skyline a jagged reminder of paths not taken. Footsteps pounded behind her, Daniel's voice calling her name, laced with hurt, but she didn't stop until she reached the side garden, collapsing against a wrought iron bench, sobs racking her frame. How had she gotten here? Vowing eternity to a man she cared for deeply, yet whose touch never ignited her like a single glance from his mother. It was cruel, this twist of fate, a cosmic joke on the heart's stubborn memory. Madeline. Evelyn's voice, that whiskey timbre, cut through the chaos. She appeared at the garden's edge, shawl draped over her shoulders against the chill, her face a mask of composure cracking at the edges. Daniel hovered behind her, phone in hand, murmuring to someone, probably the planner, damage control already in motion. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his eyes darting between them, suspicion dawning. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, gentle but firm. "Give us a moment, sweetheart. Please." Her tone brooked no argument, the editor's command resurfacing. Daniel hesitated, hurt flashing in his eyes so like his mother's, before nodding curtly and retreating toward the church doors, casting one last bewildered glance over his shoulder. Silence fell, heavy as the gathering clouds. Evelyn stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the path, until she was near enough for Madeline to catch that jasmine scent, now mingled with the faint rose of her perfume. "You froze," Evelyn said simply, no accusation, just fact. She sank onto the bench beside Madeline, close but not touching, the space between them a chasm and a bridge all at once. Madeline laughed, a bitter, broken sound that dissolved into tears. "Froze?" "I shattered, Evelyn. Seeing you there." It was like 12 years collapsed into one breath. Daniel's ring on my finger felt like a lie, and you, she choked, wiping her face with the heel of her hand, mascara smearing like war paint. "You were the truth I buried." Evelyn's hand hovered, then settled on Madeline's knee, a tentative anchor. Her touch was warm, steady, sending a shiver up Madeline's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "I know. God, I know. When Daniel told me he was dating you, of all people, I thought it was a sign from some cruel universe. A chance to watch over you from afar, to see the woman I loved become part of my world without the mess." Her voice cracked, green eyes glistening. "But it was selfish. I should have said something sooner, warned you off, or confessed to him. Instead, I played the gracious future mother-in-law, all while my heart screamed every time you smiled at him." Madeline turned, searching Evelyn's face, the fine lines around her mouth from years of holding back, the wisdom in her gaze that youth couldn't touch. "Why didn't you leave him? Back then, when we had fire instead of embers. We could have built something?" Evelyn finished, a sad smile tugging her lips. "I thought about it every day after you left. Packed a bag, once even tickets to Seattle, where no one knew us. But Daniel came home from school that summer, so lost after his grandfather's death, clinging to me like I was his North Star. And Richard. He's not a villain, Madeline. He's a good man, flawed like us all, who gave me a life when I was scared and alone at 22, fresh from a conservative family in Ohio who called my phase, with college girls a sin." She paused, thumb tracing idle patterns on Madeline's knee. "I chose safety over the blaze. And I've regretted it every day since." The admission hung between them, raw and unadorned, stripping away the years like so many veils. Madeline felt the pull again, that magnetic draw that had defined her youth, but tempered now by time's wisdom. She covered Evelyn's hand with her own, lacing their fingers, the simple act a reclamation. "And now?" Daniel's devastated. "My family's probably Googling annulments. What do we do with this wreckage? Evelyn's gaze softened, leaning in until their foreheads touched, breaths mingling in the crisp air. We start honest. No more secrets. I filed for divorce 6 months ago, quietly for Daniel's sake. Thought it would ease things before the wedding, but cowardice won again. She pulled back slightly, cupping Madeline's cheek. If you'll have me, if we can have each other, messy and real, then let's burn it all down. Properly this time. Inside, the murmurs grew, guests spilling out, Daniel's silhouette in the doorway, phone still pressed to his ear. But out here, in this stolen garden moment, Madeline felt the wildfire reignite, not destructive but illuminating. She nodded, tears giving way to a tentative smile. Yes, let's. What followed was a storm of reckonings, the kind that reshapes skylines. Daniel found them there, hands entwined, and the truth spilled out in halting words. Evelyn's confession first, her voice steady as she laid bare the affair, the love that had never faded. Madeline added her piece, voice trembling, apologizing for the pain she'd unwittingly caused, for loving his mother while building a life with him. Daniel listened, face paling then flushing, the betrayal etching lines on his young features that no amount of privilege could erase. All this time, he muttered, sinking to the path's edge, head in hands. I thought we were solid. Evelyn knelt before him, mother first, lover second. You are solid, Danny. This doesn't change who you are or how much I love you. But it changes us, me, her, this family we almost were. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed, searching hers for the lies he'd missed. Did you ever think about telling me? Before the proposal? Madeline shook her head, guilt twisting like a knife. I convinced myself it was over. You deserved better than my ghosts. Daniel's laugh was hollow, but he reached out, pulling his mother into a fierce hug, then extending a hand to Madeline, a bridge, fragile but offered. I hate this, but I get it. Love's a bitch. They sat there as dusk deepened, the three of them tangled in grief and grace, forging a new map from the ruins. The wedding, of course, was called off, caterers redirected to a family brunch, guests sent home with apologies and care packages of mini eclairs. Madeline's parents arrived in a flurry of questions, her father's brow furrowed under his Cubs cap, her mother clutching a rosary like a talisman. We just want you happy, sweetheart, her mom said eventually, after the tears and the explanations, hugging Madeline tight in the rectory's dim light. Whoever makes your heart sing. It was more than Madeline expected, suburban Catholics bending toward understanding, a small miracle in the Windy City's whirlwind. In the weeks that followed, Chicago became their canvas for rewriting. Evelyn and Madeline moved slow, deliberate, coffee dates at Dollop in Andersonville, where they talked for hours about the years apart, Evelyn's quiet divorce finalizing amid stacks of paperwork, Madeline's freelance column turning confessional, essays on love's long shadows that went viral in the queer-lit circles. Daniel, bless him, threw himself into therapy, then mediation sessions where he unpacked his own heartbreaks, emerging not unbroken but resilient, dating a barista from his gym with a laugh that echoed his mother's. Their first real night together came on a crisp November evening, Evelyn's brownstone emptied of Richard's ghosts, furniture rearranged, walls repainted a soft sage that caught the firelight. Madeline arrived with a bottle of that Thai red from their old haunt, nerves jangling like keys. Evelyn pulled her inside, no words needed, their kiss at the door a homecoming, deeper now, wiser, laced with the patience of second chances. They made love on the living room floor, candles guttering, bodies rediscovering rhythms lost to time, Evelyn's hands mapping Madeline's curves with reverence, Madeline's lips tracing the silver in Evelyn's hair like constellations. You're my forever, Evelyn breathed after, as they lay tangled, the city humming beyond the windows. Madeline traced her collarbone, heart full. And you're my fire. But stories like theirs aren't tidy bows, they're tapestries, woven with loose threads. Holiday dinners tested them. Daniel's first Thanksgiving with his ex-fiancée, now almost stepmom, awkward, but laced with inside jokes. Madeline's parents warming to Evelyn over pie, calling her Ev with tentative affection. Whispers followed, of course. Industry gossip about the magazine scandal reboot. Judgmental side eyes at the Jewel-Osco where Madeline picked up Evelyn's favorites. But they faced it hand in hand. Madeline's book tour stops featuring Evelyn in the front row. Evelyn's consulting gigs punctuated by Madeline's surprise lunches. By spring, as cherry blossoms dusted the paths of Grant Park, they stood at the altar, not St. Mary's, but a sun-dappled gazebo in Jackson Park, officiated by a queer rabbi friend with a penchant for bad puns. Daniel walked Madeline down the aisle, his arms steady, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Told you love's a bitch," he whispered, kissing her cheek before taking his seat beside Richard, who nodded approval from the sidelines, a truce of fathers and sons. Vows exchanged were simple, earned, Evelyn promising to choose the blaze every dawn, Madeline vowing to write our story unafraid. Rings slipped on, gold bands etched with dunes and waves, and as they kissed, the world didn't shatter, it bloomed. In the end, it wasn't about freezing or fleeing, but thawing into a love that honored the past without being chained to it. Madeline and Evelyn built from the ashes, a home in Edgewater with lake views, a podcast on late-blooming romances that drew listeners hungry for hope, Daniel's wedding the next summer where he toasted to messy beginnings and beautiful middles. They taught each other grace, for youth's fire, for age's wisdom, for the secrets that shape us. And in quiet moments, as Evelyn's head rested on Madeline's shoulder watching sunsets paint the horizon, Madeline knew, some loves aren't secrets to bury, but flames to tend, lighting paths none could have foreseen.